Mapping the College Audition. I'm your host, Charlie Murphy, director of MTCA. That's Musical Theater College Auditions. Check us out at mtca.com. And today we've got Jacob Ben Widmar and returning guest Danny Gurwin from Oakland University. For our newer listeners, this is another one of our college deep dive episodes where we explore the landscape of the college theater world and try to demystify this daunting audition process one school at a time. It was really fun to get to talk to Jacob and Danny. This is another example of the twosomes not being so daunting, those twosome episodes. Maybe I'm ready to get over my reticence at having multiple guests, as we do have a nice little slew of Michigan-based twosomes coming your way, both recently, and this is really the second in a three-part series of Michigan-baked twosomes. I'm hinting at an upcoming episode of the University of Michigan episode with two guests as well. But I had gotten to speak with Danny previously in his episode about the University of Arizona, and I knew Jacob from having taken a Shakespeare class with him during the pandemic. We all sheltered and took like a brushing up our Shakespeare class with the great Peter Francis James, sometimes called PFJ. Elizabeth and I did that together, as did Jacob and his husband. It was just like a lot of couples acting out their Shakespearean dreams in the middle of a pandemic. It was just super fun times. But it always, I think, for me, leads to a bit more of a fun and a free episode, as I think you're going to hear when I know that person well enough that we're able to joke around a bit more, as we do in this episode. Just worth noting that in my case, I wanted to say out loud, that doesn't necessarily mean that I have like a preference for the schools when I have those relationships, right? Sometimes I'll hear from parents a version of like, well, MTCA must really love this school, when often it's just like we have a strong relationship with a particular faculty member there. But I wouldn't want any of you to ever feel like that means that there's something preferential on our end, right? If we know a Rachel Stevens or a Lauren Houghton, from having been colleagues at MTCA, then yes, that episode and in general our interaction with them, there might be a little bit more frivolity, a little bit more familiarity, but that isn't meant as an extra endorsement on CCM or FSU. I'm thinking of Rachel especially because not only was she someone we've done an episode with, but she also used to be a faculty member at Oakland University, this very school. And I do think it's worth saying, as we talk about faculty members shifting, and we go into this a bit at the top of this episode, just like what that effect of faculty movement can be on a program. I think Danny says it really well in terms of how quickly change can realistically be affected with a new administration, or really his point is maybe how not quick that it can be at times, and like what each new person is trying to build upon about the previous administration has done. But I also do think there's really value in having faculty who are in it for the longer haul as well. Always a mix of good and bad there. Some programs really need a bit of fresh blood at times. I remember feeling that way at CMU, that like as I was graduating, I was like, a little influx of fresh blood wouldn't be the worst thing. A lot of these faculty members have been here a long, long time. And then like not so long after I graduated, basically the entire faculty was turned over. But it's always a mix of, the excitement of the new. It's great to have new people, and also the value of like long-standing institutional memory and what that can build over over a period of years. So something interesting we talk about on the pod, and I talk a little bit in the takeaway as well. But that brings me to a project I have earmarked for our upcoming summer break, which will be coming in a few weeks. You still got a few weeks, almost 2 months here, but we're going to take a little break, as we always do in the summer. And I've talked about this on the podcast before, but I really will do it. This is going to happen, which is that I'm going to go back to previous episodes and just add those disclaimers and additional thoughts when the person who did the episode is no longer with the program. I want to generally leave these episodes up and add to them, right? In most cases, it'll mean just having an additional faculty member on the podcast eventually as well. But since we're not going to be able to keep up with the rate of change at all these schools and all the faculty members as they retire and potentially move on to other schools, I do want to be able to give you a bit of an auditory guide through those episodes as best as I can. So for instance, I would go back to Danny's episode and say, Danny is no longer at the University of Arizona and now at Oakland University. Check out this episode that you're about to hear. I will just say, as I started diving into that project a bit more in recent weeks, it is notable just how many schools do have different faculty members in the 4 years that we've been doing this project, this podcast, right? There's always been a lot of turnover with faculty members. There's nothing new to that, but I do think it is notable with the faculty in the kind of post-COVID landscape that there is a lot of turnover. Some of that's the aftershocks of like the quick hirings at the height of COVID, and then the rebound that schools made, and really the rebound that the industry has made sense. I think there was a lot of professors who did a version of like, I might try out teaching in the pandemic, or maybe some of them who went, I'm done with teaching. I want to change in my life during the pandemic. And then, with that, there's sort of each door that opened and then each door that closed, there's just like a significant ripple effect across the landscape. So it is something that has shifted a lot and is continuing to shift in those little aftershocks. So that is a project, a little something to look forward to on our summer break, as I'm going to encourage you all to go back and listen to old episodes. You'll still get to hear a bit of new content from me as well as we're doing that. As far as here we are this May 2025, it was great getting to meet a lot of our listeners at our recent Meet MTCA workshop. Thank you to those who attended and made that such a success. For our class of 2026 and younger MTCA students, I do want to tell you we have a great webinar coming up with Leo and Lisi talking about parent versus student responsibilities. Very frequent takeaway from this very podcast. That's this Thursday, May 15th at 9 p.m. Eastern. And I know all of you juniors and sophomores, you're diving into our sprinkling of spring master classes in anticipation of our big summer faculty masterclass week coming up this August. I'm excited to see so many of you in person that week. All right, shall we get to it? Without further ado, here's Danny Gurwin and Jacob Ben Widmar from Oakland University. Well, we are so excited to be joined by Danny Gurwin and Jacob Ben Widmar from Oakland University. Danny has a BFA in MT from the University of Michigan, been on Broadway in things like Scarlet Pimpernel, Full Monty, Urinetown, Little Women, Kismet, How the Grinch Stole Christmas, a lot more, and previously coordinated and taught at places like the University of Michigan, UCLA, Western Michigan, Youngstown University, AMDA, and was previously the head of acting/musical theater at the University of Arizona, for whom he was a previous podcast guest. And Jacob has a BFA in music, dance, and theater from BYU, an MFA in directing from FSU, has been involved in the Broadway productions of The Book of Mormon, Xanadu, Irving Berlin's White Christmas, and is currently an assistant professor of theater at Oakland University, where I didn't read that Danny is currently head of musical theater at Oakland University. How do we do, boys? Did we get okay on those bios of sort of a mismatch of credits and titles?
That was great. That was great.
That was great.
Well, here we are. We're so excited to have you on. We're talking about Oakland University, which is located in Oakland County, Michigan. We'll talk about the class size and the intention. We're talking about 12 to 16 MTs, it looks like. They offer BFA in acting, BFA in MT, BFA in dance. We'll talk about all this stuff. Before we dive too deep into the school, I'd love just to hear a little bit about your bios in terms of your journey to the school, though, Danny, not too much on your journey from different schools, because I have specific questions later about school to school. But let's just talk a little bit about, and maybe we'll start with you, Jacob, just of like your journey to academia.
Oh, sure. So I was a Broadway performer, did all the things, was at Radio City Music Hall. I always like to point out how fun it was to be center stage singing with 36 Rockettes kicking behind me. Those are some great highlights. And then a pandemic hit, and I thought, oh, okay, maybe I'm not being artistically fulfilled. You know, we all had a kind of reset. And the last thing I had done was a Broadway guest artist on I was Olaf in Frozen on the Disney cruise ship, The Wonder. It was very fun. But so, you have all these fun things you're doing, and then all of a sudden pandemic hits and you're going, wait, am I artistically being fulfilled? Or is this just the round circle of audition, book a gig, it closes, then it all round robins again? So I had talked to some friends, and they had suggested going to school to get my master's in directing. And I'd always been interested in directing and choreographing, but I didn't know quite how to make that pivot, how to quite, not leave the acting behind, but just make that pivot. And a friend said, don't go because you're looking to change your life and change your degree and change your work. Go to work on yourself as an artist. And that really hit home. And so I thought, okay, I'm going to go get my master's. Whatever comes after, but I'm going to work on myself as an artist. And it was the most amazing experience. I went to Florida State University. It was incredible. I found so much out about myself as an artist, about art in itself. And also while I was there, I taught. That's part of the deal, because it is a fully funded program. You just have to teach.
Yeah.
And I fell in love with teaching, and I fell in love with students. And so it was a very easy transition. And Oakland was actually one of the first schools I applied to. And there's a professor here at Oakland, Lene, and I fell in love with her. And my on-campus interview was so fun, and it was just like, let me give this a try.
Yeah.
And we both have finished our first year here at Oakland, and it's just been a blast. It's really been fun.
And so, you guys are both new to this program, and I want to talk specifically about the newness of the program, but it sounds like you're newer to teaching, whereas Danny, we've had a little bit more history. And that, do you want to give us a little bit of that history in terms of getting into teaching? And then I don't mean to tell you can't tell me some of your journey, but please do. Yeah.
Okay. Well, so I was a, performer on Broadway for many years I was in New York for about 13 years and then in LA after that for about 10 years or so. And then I was teaching in LA. I taught at AMDA in LA when that school was just opening up. The LA campus was opening up. So I learned a lot teaching there. I taught there for about 6 years. And then I got a call one day about being a guest professor at the University of Arizona. So I took that and went to Arizona and then ended up staying for about 12 years and running the program. But for me, it was, I always loved doing master classes and things like that when I was performing. And I thought, no, I really like this. This is really fulfilling. And there were days for me when a good day teaching felt better than a good day performing. And I thought, oh, well, I can do both of these things. And as I move forward and as I'm coming to Oakland, I'm realizing that, teaching sort of full time is sort of becoming what I enjoy doing. I still perform a little bit, but I'm really focused on administrative stuff, heading the program, curriculum, all that good stuff. So.
Yep. I love it. All right. This is so well said. So let's get into Oakland a little bit. And I just really want to hear, this is kind of a series that we're doing of some of the fresher takes on programs, because we have some people who are a little newer to programs. What is the experience of you guys getting to know what Oakland is as of now? And then I also kind of want to hear, of course, coming in of like, what are some of the intentions of what it might be? So let's start with the idea of like, when you came and encountered the students, what does an Oakland student feel like to you compared to other programs, but also just in terms of who they are as human beings? Like, what makes an Oakland student an Oakland student?
Well, that's a really good question. We inherited this program, right, from Josh Young.
For sure. Previous podcast guest.
Podcast guest who's now at Missouri State, had come to Oakland to revamp the program. And then he had left to Missouri State. And then after that, they had an interim of a couple professors. And now it's Danny and I. So in complete honesty, I want to be completely honest. When we showed up, the students were a little confused as to, are we going to stick around? Are we here? What's going on? Because they had been recruited by Josh, handed off to another couple, and then now they're ours. After this first year, I can say that Danny and I have very quickly and very solidly built an incredible amount of trust. And so these students are now very much opening up, excited to work, excited to have Danny and I, who are ferocious in terms of our passion for theater and teaching. And so it's become this nice mix of work ethic and pushing them and figuring out who they are and figuring out who Oakland is right now also.
I love it. And I'll throw this to you, Danny, too. But this is really, I had this question down for later, but let's dive into it because I think it's so relevant to you guys, but it's also so relevant to so many of these programs. There is so much faculty movement. I mean, I'm currently right now recording intros to podcasts from 4 years ago of going, hey, I think this podcast is still relevant, but this person no longer works at this school and this person now works at this school, and all these different places they leave, right? And so, we've had so many in the past, especially since the pandemic. It's always been true, but the past 4 years, there's been more movement than ever in terms of professors. And I kind of just, I'd love to speak to what is that experience of, from the student perspective, from the faculty perspective, and your experience of the student perspective of a changing program head, especially, a case like Josh Young, where there is a real personality and a real, hey, I'm taking this and I'm moving it in a certain direction. Of course, one person never makes a program. And so what is that experience of what is left behind? And then what are you picking up of the pieces of like the promises you feel that were made from before, and then what your promises are? Just what is that experience of sort of passing the torch? It's like a director changing a show with a director changing. It's like still the same show, but a different. How does that work in terms of your experience coming in? And I'll throw it to you, Danny.
Well, I think in terms of education stuff in academia, you always want to build on what the other person has has bequeathed you,
Yep.
essentially, because it's not really healthy to dismantle anything too ferociously or too quickly
Right.
when you're coming into a new program. Because you have to sort of, it takes a couple years for anything new curriculum and all that stuff to go through. Jacob and I just literally revamped the entire curriculum for Oakland, but it won't go into effect until the fall of 2026.
Uh-huh.
So, because it takes a while to get through committees and all that stuff.
Yep.
But I think, with what Josh did some amazing work here, and he got, a lot of students in with fresh takes on musical theater who weren't as experienced as say other students in other programs.
Yep.
Um, but they're hungry and they're hungry to be pushed and hungry to be working and hungry to be on their feet. And that's
Yep.
really exciting. So it was about getting to know them. You have to spend time getting to know them. And as Jacob said so beautifully, you have to develop a trust with them.
Yep.
And you have to make sure that they trust you, that you trust them, that they believe in what it is they're doing and in the program that they're a part of, because you don't want someone feeling like, oh, I have to leave too.
Yep.
So many students
Mm.
sometimes will also say, oh, well, this program isn't for me. This is too crazy. I don't like the changing vibe. So
Yep.
it's about anchoring it really quickly and then allowing it to sort of shape and form. And then I think over the next couple of years, Jacob and I can really sculpt and mold the program a little bit more thoroughly and really start to figure out who is that Oakland student. Uh,
Yep.
we traveled, like we did a ton of recruiting this year. We only have a small class, but we traveled everywhere trying to get the word out about the school, about that we're there, that it's a new direction. Um,
Yep.
but I absolutely built on what Josh sort of established, and some of the classes he created are still in play.
Yep.
We'll start to sort of uh, transfigure those over the next couple of years into classes that make sense for the curriculum that Jacob and I envision.
Yep.
Um, but yeah, yeah. So I think it's all about building and building trust, and then
I love it.
slowly making those bigger changes so that students don't feel shell shocked.
Yep. Totally,
One
totally
thing
makes
I've been
sense.
sur
Yeah.
one thing I've been surprised about is in our recruitment, which we're really excited about the class we have coming in. They're very talented, and it's going to be really fun for Danny and I to help shape and build them. And um, but the parents ask, "Are you going to stay?"
Mm-hmm.
So there is a knowledge that there are changing, that the faculty's changing quickly, not just at our school. This is something they ask at other schools
For
too.
sure.
So Danny and I can confidently be like, "No, we're staying."
Yeah.
But that's the thing you encounter
So
as a
yeah, I'll ask you
student.
here. Are you staying? Are you going to stay?
Yeah, yeah.
You're
No, we're
totally
staying.
staying.
Because that's the thing. If we're after recruiting, we
Yeah.
can't abandon. There's a moral obligation. I look at these students and I'm like, I, I asked you to come here. You decided you would trust me, and then for me to drop you is a huge like.
Yeah.
That's it's a moral obligation to. I brought you here. I have to see this
Yeah.
through.
It's
Yeah.
really hard to, I mean, in my experience, it's been really hard to when you have to make a transition, it's really hard to leave students behind. You want to make sure they're taken care of and they're in good hands and that everything is
Yep.
shored up before you go. But it can be very hard. It's hard emotionally and it's it's
Of course.
it's hard. It can be
We're
hard academically too.
we're always making sports analogies on the podcast, and it feels like sort of, it's like player movement in the NBA or whatever. You're like, am I still a Warriors fan or am I a Steph Curry fan? Am I going to follow my and there's
Right.
heartbreak that's left behind of going. I love, often people go, I love both. I love my school and I love this program head. Do I go with this person to a new school? Do I
Yep.
Exactly. Exactly.
I like both. I like, it's and not always an option in easy ways, and it's complicated. But let's get into some of this curriculum. I'd love to hear as many specifics, and you guys can tag team this as you want. Tell me a little bit about what the curriculum is, and then as you know it, if it's not too impossible to sort of parse through this, as you know the changes that are coming into play in 2026, which many of our listeners would be joining potentially in the class of 2026, what that
Mhm.
curriculum will look like. So kind of where you are and where you're going from a specific curricular perspective.
Sure. There's a lot of focus right now on individual song work and sort of different genres of that song work throughout the classes. So freshman year, there was a performance class that was about sort of solo song work. Sophomore year, there was sort of a similar class about that. In the junior year, there was yet another class that was similar, really focusing on style,
Mm-hmm.
but on that individual song work. So what Jacob and I are are essentially starting to do, just to uh, uh, shrink it down. Essentially, we are changing the curriculum so there's a lot more variety in terms of what performance activities and classes you can have. So we start with, so the plan will be to eventually have solo performance work, given circumstances, foundational work in the freshman year, which is where it belongs, and then move into duet, scene work, all that stuff, musical theater, scene work and scenes in the sophomore year. And then Jacob developed an amazing class this past year, which was a huge success, and we're going to keep it on. But it's a Sondheim intensive for the juniors. And it's actually a musical theater topics class, so we could rotate composers or lyricists if we felt we wanted to. But the Sondheim class has been very successful, and the students were super excited, and Jacob did an amazing job navigating and steering that ship. So, and then in the senior year, we'll focus on auditions and showcase, and so everything will come together in that. But that way, there's a dedicated performance semester each year, and the students get a variety of performance elements, plus classes like cabaret, doing a cabaret, or um, there's directing, and so there's all sorts of electives that students could take along with that they can sort of shape their journey as they go. So they're not just stuck in this one track, but they get to sort of supplement it with things that they want to do to become the performer they'd like to become.
Yep. And Jake, I'll throw it to you if anything you want to add, but also let's talk about dance and acting as well, in terms of some of those specifics, if you have any.
Sure. Going off of what Danny was saying, in terms of the other thing we structured it is so you get me as a professor, your freshman, sophomore you get Danny, junior you get me, senior you get Danny, and then I join a little bit for the last semester. So it's a fun bounce back and forth between us both, and then we both invite each other to each other's classes. So Danny will come watch Sondheim classes, I'll come watch some acting the song classes of his, and so the students always have this presence of Danny and Jacob are here. We are here, we are watching your progress, and we are calling you into the office if we need to discuss some hopes and dreams that we have for you. You know what I mean? For dance, so when we inherited this program in September, I went and talked to the dance head and the music faculty head. And it became clear that there was a little bit of communication that was lacking between the three departments. And so what we've done is very quickly built a bridge with the dance department and the music department. I actually this morning just answered an email to some vocal faculty members that were asking about students. And then it just happened that, and this shows you how small the world is, Amanda Lehman, who teaches our musical theater jazz class, toured with my husband on 42nd Street years ago. And so that's been a very quick bond. You know what I mean? And so we're building the dance department up for the MTs. Even I was on an email with one of the heads of dance, finding a new space. How can we get new bars, ballet bars? What do the students need? So that it's fun for the dance faculty to teach, but it's also fun for the students. So it's a matter of taking what is there, and we're building it, specifying it, becoming more rigorous with it. Because I'm a firm believer in dance and movement and physicality of the body. And that's both with the vocal classes and the dance classes.
And I want to throw you the acting opportunity to talk about acting too, and then also maybe a little interdisciplinary, if there's anything like, how do the BFA actors interact with the BFA MTs or BFA dance? How does it work in terms of being able to cross over or not cross over within different departments?
Oh, you have the opportunity to cross over all departments. We have a young lady who's going to her senior year. She's a dance major and an MT major. And she comes to me, she actually asked me to be her mentor for her big dance thesis project her senior year. So even right there, with having me come in, there is a complete crossover. And it allows the students, there's the minor in dance, and they just made a minor in musical theater dance, which allows you to take all the upper division classes with all the majors, but without all the kinesiology and all of that kind of study. So right there is the chance to take the major classes with other dance majors, but even do a minor. And that's what makes up a lot of the dance department's minor are the musical theater students.
Makes a
And
lot of
with
sense.
Yeah.
acting, the BFA acting, like Danny's directing Wild Party in the fall, and I'm directing
Mhm.
Mr. Burns, a post-electric play in the fall. Both of ours have mixtures of BAs, BFAs.
Mhm.
Anyone can be in the shows. Um, and
I
so it
love
just
it.
allows a lot of opportunity.
And then what about just curricularly? What's the sort of acting sequence in terms of what they're doing freshman, sophomore, junior year, et cetera, from an acting perspective?
Oh,
So
we're
they will
redoing
have.
that too.
Well, we're doing that too. Yeah.
We're doing that
So
too.
it's a full court press on curricular change.
Oh, keeping the
Um,
basketball analogy, I like it.
well, hey, you're welcome.
I'm lost.
I'm
You said
I'm very
kinesiology, so
sporty.
we're all lost there. We're
I'm very
different
sporty.
ways, I guess. Yeah.
Um, so they'll have essentially an acting one class in the freshman year, which is again modern realism and that kind of
Mm-hmm.
thing, and understanding foundational work, tactics, objectives, given circumstances, all the things that they're learning in their acting the song class. So the
Mm-hmm.
techniques are very similar. It's not a different ball game. Hey, I did it
Yep.
again. It's not completely, some sort of separate idea that acting a monologue is different than
Right.
acting a song.
Sure.
So we're working together with the acting department to make sure that all the terminology and all of that work is seamless.
Yep.
And then in acting two, they'll move on to more advanced sort of modern realism. Um, they'll do some stylized pieces and stylistic things and sort of ultra modern stuff as well. So it's a chance to explore. And then in acting three is essentially a styles class. So it'll start with Shakespeare, there's Chekhov, there's a few other stylistic things that the faculty is still exploring as we put
Mm-hmm.
together those syllabi for the new tracking of the acting class.
Mm-hmm.
But you have essentially 3 semesters of acting through the freshman, sophomore, and junior year.
Yep.
There's an acting four that would be an elective for musical theater majors, but because there's so much focus on dance and movement and singing and all the music stuff that we're
Yep.
connected to as well, um, that becomes an elective in the senior year. But
Uh,
they get, as I said, a dedicated musical theater performance class every year
yep.
in one of the semesters.
Well, let's talk
And
about.
as
Go ahead. Yeah.
Oh, sorry, I was just going to say, and an example of how they go hand in hand is like the junior year when they're studying Shakespeare in the fall, then they'll do Sondheim in the
Mm-hmm.
winter. And Shakespeare and Sondheim are hand in hand when you
Mm-hmm.
look at analyzing the text and how it's used and how it works. And so we're looking at not just classes, 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 we're looking at the overall arc
Yep.
of the program.
Yep, I love that. Let's talk a little bit about senior year. So, sort of, I know obviously it's your first year, so we've done it once, but how are we preparing our seniors for their launch into the business? So, what does that look like in terms of the kind of classes they get and the kind of
Right.
instruction they get professionally, and then also in terms of like connections with the industry and those kind of things?
Yeah, yeah. So all of that, I mean, we start preparing their books sort of in the junior year. I mean, they also have coachings separate from their voice lessons. We have musical theater coaches on staff, and
Mm-hmm.
students are assigned to coach, and they essentially get to go through their material. They can work on their book, they can work on class material. So that's a little extra perk that goes on. And allows students to practice and rehearse,
Yep.
in a self-guided sort of way. Um, but Showcase, we really it's really the senior year that starts it. There's a business of the business class that I teach called what's it called? Professional Practices.
Mm-hmm.
And essentially, that's the business class. So they meet agents, they meet casting directors, they meet managers. We talk about budgets. They write a city paper and sort of, talk about moving expenses and sort of it's a practical guide to what they will do when they graduate. So they have to do a lot of research on where they want to live, where they want to go. They can write it about Atlanta. They can write it about LA. They write about
Mm-hmm.
Chicago, New York. And so we go through those papers so that they have literally a practical guide of what they want to do
Mm-hmm.
when it's time to graduate. That goes hand in hand with the auditions class in the senior year, the musical theater auditions class, getting your book ready, um, which is something that we focus on heavily toward the end of the junior year and into the senior year. And then essentially we start building showcase in the fall term of the senior year as well.
Mm-hmm.
And then that culminates with a class called Presentation to the Profession in the winter term of the senior year. So, which is essentially rehearsal for showcase.
Mm-hmm.
So we start rehearsing it, we start shaping it in the fall, we finish polishing it in the spring or winter term, as they call it here at Oakland. And um, and we get students ready for showcase. We have a live showcase in New York. for musical theater, and that usually happens the second week of March.
Uh-huh.
And we share it with other schools. And what's great is we share it with Western Michigan University currently. And this past year, we also shared it with Missouri State. So Josh got
Uh-huh.
to see some of his students that he recruited in their showcase, and we got to share the afternoons together, which was pretty great. So that was fun.
I
It was
love
good
it.
to see him.
And then is there any digital component as currently for the showcase as well?
We're working on that. Right now, students, we ask that they create digital assets that do get uploaded to breakdown services, but
Yep.
we don't do anything formal in terms of a filming of that stuff. It's something we're
Sure.
working on. It's something we're looking to find grant money for, so that we can have two different elements, so we can have a polished element online. So right now, students are responsible for that element. Um, so we're putting a lot of eggs in the basket of the live showcase,
Yep.
which is a new experience for me. I'm used to sort of recording showcase and videoing
Yep.
and spending 3 days filming, and
Yep.
so we're working on that. It's my hope to have two elements in the next couple of years for showcase.
I love it. And you mentioned those city papers. Do you have a sense currently of, maybe just with the senior class or the ones that you know well of where most students are planning on going, or most planning to New York, or most some thinking about Chicago, or some thinking about Atlanta? Where are you seeing most of your class going?
Yeah, well, the focus has always been New York for them. So a few of them are very much keen on being in New York City. Chicago is a big, it's close to Detroit. It's
Right.
not far away. It's about 5 hours away by car. So students are looking at Chicago very seriously. And we actually have a couple students that want to go to Atlanta,
Yep.
start busting into the film and television industry there, which is, booming at this moment.
Historically, leaving LA, it's all we hear about is that
Yeah,
nothing
yeah.
is filming in
There
LA.
you
Don't go to
go.
LA if you want to be
There you
Yeah.
go.
TV and film these days,
But I
they say.
think the
Yeah.
the closeness of Chicago to Detroit, Atlanta's not that far away in terms of the East Coast.
Yep.
So those are where students are looking, and New York's still the primary focus.
Totally makes sense. And do you have a sense of where, from a perspective of where your students come from or come to you from? Like how many of them, we'll talk about cost in a second, but how many of them come from Michigan, near Michigan, Midwest? How many come from different parts of the country? And we'll also talk about recruiting, but where do you have a sense from their classes currently, sort of where are they coming from to get to Oakland?
We have a lot in the surrounding states, basically. Like we have Indiana, Wisconsin. Currently, the ones that we've recruited, we have coming from Texas. We have coming
Mm-hmm.
from Iowa. We have coming from Arkansas. So it
Mm-hmm.
is a lot of. Now that you mentioned it, Charlie, that's a really
Those aren't
good
our
question.
surrounding. Texas is not
Yeah,
surrounding.
never mind.
Yeah.
We are far-reaching. Maybe we haven't gone as far as the coast yet, but
Well, we'll
there
get
are.
there.
We'll get there. There are a lot that are from Michigan.
Yeah.
But this is not a commuter school for our program.
Right.
The program is not a commuter school program. There are students who are coming from surrounding areas, states, and beyond.
Well, that brings us maybe to that idea of cost, and you can explain some of this in-state versus out-of-state. So it sounds like in-state tuition is about 14,000, and then it would be 23,000 if you're out of state. Can you talk me through what that specifics those are?
Sure. So out-of-state tuition is about $23,000 for students at Oakland, which is, again, in the market of musical theater programs, it's very low.
Yep.
In terms of cost. But what's great about Oakland is that out-of-state students in the musical theater program or the acting program are guaranteed in-state tuition, which is only about $14,000. That does not include housing, food and
Sure.
housing, but about $14,000 for tuition. And then when you throw in merit scholarships and that kind of thing for students, if they bring in AP credit, or they have a great grade point average, great test scores, they can get academic scholarships from the school, which are tuition waivers. So
Yep.
that could bring tuition down 14,000 down to 12,000 down to. There's actually a $12,000 award for some merit scholars. I think it's 14 or 16,000 for the top tier.
There's a 9 and a 12.
9 and a 12. Thank you.
9 and a
Mm.
12.
9 and a 12, 9,000 and 12,000. And that brings tuition way down.
Yep.
Then you throw in department talent scholarships and things like that are given by Jacob and myself. And that can really bring tuition down to, under $10,000 a year.
Yep.
So all that money that you save going to college, going to Oakland, you can use later on to buy yourself an apartment in New York, as opposed to shelling out tens of thousands of dollars when you are in
I don't know if
school.
it buys an apartment in New York anymore. Maybe it's like part of
Well,
my closet
but a
these
very
days.
small, a very
Believe me, I
small
look at
apartment.
these. It's a
Very
Very
small,
small
tiny
apartment.
closet in
very
New
small
York, man.
apartment.
Well, I want to piggyback on that if that's
Yes,
okay.
please.
So just to be very clear for your listeners and viewers,
So go.
when we talk about tuition, tuition is $14,000. If you are out of state, tuition is $14,000. Period. The only catch is that when you're out of state, you are required to stay on campus for 2 years and maintain a 2.5 grade point average. So that's what brings it to the 23, 24 price tag. Then after those 2 years, you're free to do whatever you want. The tuition remains the
14.
in-state tuition, very affordable.
Very
and
helpful.
the other thing that is a great asset to our school, which I always get surprised about because it's such a great deal. We are a no-fee school. So you will not pay for parking. You will not pay extra for an accompanist. You will not pay extra for voice lessons. You will not
pay an equipment fee. You will not pay any of those fees that go into sort of soft money and faculty or something.
I was just looking at
that doesn't happen.
Yeah, and I was just looking at a school right now that was like, just to be in the performing arts program is a $500 fee. There's none of that exists. Laundry, free, no fee.
Dang, we love it. We love it. Yeah, I always think it's a little funny when I think schools are trying to be really transparent with being clear about housing costs. But to some extent, I'm like, well, you're going to have to live somewhere no matter what. Like, unless really the dorm room is that much more expensive than a local apartment. It's like you're talking about smaller differences compared to they're going to have to pay for housing somehow, unless they have an aunt who lives nearby or something that, for the most part, you're going to have to pay to feed and house yourself.
And that housing does include, when we say housing, it also includes board, so your meal plan or whatever as well.
Amazing. It's great. Okay, so very clear. Appreciate the scholarship stuff too. One thing we didn't catch because I was so interested in the changing curricula and all this thing. I often ask a little earlier. Is just could you give us a sense of with the BFA program, what are we talking about percentage wise of how many classes are going to be artistic versus how many classes are going to be academic? So basically, hearing what is the experience of talk about majors outside of, if you double major in dance, but what are people getting outside of the acting, singing, dancing world at Oakland University?
Well, it's a public university, so you do have your gen eds. Essentially, about 84 credits are in the major. So those are your acting, singing, dancing, voice lessons, all of that stuff is in the major. And then you have about 38 to 40 credits that are gen eds. So you do have your composition, you do have English, if you don't bring in any credit from AP things or anything like that, then you're looking at a math class, you're looking at some sort of science, you're looking at some sort of humanities class that's required. We have a great system called Degree Works, and that essentially you can look at your plan for the 4 years. It's with you. You have your password to get into it. It's your private sort of degree planner. And you can look at and as soon as you accomplish something, it checks off the box for you. So you can look and really see what you need to graduate. It gives you a percentage at the top for how close you are to graduation and what's missing and what's not missing. And so, but students get, so there's about, I don't know, 38 credits in gen eds. So you're looking at language.
And some of the classes that we teach, 2 of them as of 2026 will count for the gen ed. Musical theater history will, and so will intro to theater or theater history. Sorry.
Do you feel like those estimates, often I'm trying to estimate for them, like basically about percentage of time and effort more than really with the credit hours. If that's like a 70-30 split is what you're telling me of credit hours, do you feel like that's about the right split in terms of how much time they're spending in the theater building versus not? Or is would it be a little bit more higher of a percentage theater or lower percentage theater? You know what I mean? Like sometimes people will say like it's 84 credits, but really it's like 120 credits. We're just, in terms of the hours that they're spending.
No, actually, that's a good question, because what we did right now, Danny and I spent hours in meetings and with each other. Our theater courses were 2 credits. I don't teach a 2-credit class. I teach a faculty member accused me of teaching a master's level class in
Yes.
terms of
That
what
seems
I
very
expected.
common in the theater world that we go, oh, it's a 2-credit class. I'm like, that's not 2-credit hours.
That's not
It's not 2 credit hours. Yeah.
That's a 4-page analysis on Philia from Forum. Cut me some slack. So what we do is literally did that. So what Danny and I have done is bump, and what we have done across the whole program and department is bumped the 2 credits to 3 credits. So now you don't have to stack so many 2-credit classes to get to the 12 full-time credit status. Now there's each class is now 3 credits, which allows us the appropriate work and contact hours, and allows the students to have a little more breathing space, because now instead of 6 classes to get to a full-time status, you only need 4. Did I do that math right? I did.
Sure.
No, but
did I?
But you AP credit out of your math class. You didn't have to deal with the math class.
Oh no,
they need 2 credits. They'll need 2 classes before they would take 3.
Okay, that sounds better. So, we're doing a lot of math with my almost 4-year-old daughter right now, and it's about that level. 2 plus 3, 3 plus 7 minus 1.
There was some math involved in all of this, but we got through it.
How many of your students would then choose to use some of those 38 credits and do a minor outside of the department versus how many of the students you mentioned, some of whom will do even a double artistic major and maybe add more credits into the artistic? What does it seem like in terms of the school, in terms of who's going in which direction there?
We have one who's doing a business minor. We have another one who's doing a linguistics minor. I'll be honest, it's not terribly common.
Yeah.
But these students show us an example that it is very much possible. And doable. It's just, you just have to have the desire.
And is it more common that they do the other, where you might get a minor in musical theater dance, or that you might add more interdepartment minors?
Yeah, we have about 4 or 5 students that are currently doing the minor in dance. And then someone like the student that Jacob mentioned is a double major. So she's, for example, putting in a lot of extra time in the summer. She's working in summer classes now to help supplement her yearly credit totals so that she can graduate on time.
I love it. And then maybe had some AP credits or something that's getting out of the academics, or is still doing it all.
Absolutely. You can test out of things if you do bring credits with you. You can test out of things. You won't have to take them. And then you can take more elective credits, whether they're academic electives like art history or something in the humanities, or you want to focus on musical theater elective stuff, or dramaturgy, directing too, acting for the camera, all that stuff. Those are electives for the musical theater program.
And another great thing we have is there's a lot of encouragement. If you're interested in costume design or scenic design, you can definitely be a part of that as well and take those classes and actually design the main stage shows with the help of your mentor, because we do have BFA technical theater degree as well, which is not very common, you know what I mean? But we are able to offer that, and the students design the shows with their mentors.
Really cool. I love it. All right, well, let's take a short break, and on the back end, we're talking a little bit more about the admission process. So back in a flash.
Great.
All right, we are back with Jacob and Danny. We're going to talk a little bit about the admission process. So I'd love to kind of start with, you mentioned, some of the recruitment that you did this year. Just from a kind of holistic perspective, what does that look like for you in terms of, where you're going, how you're finding people? What does it sort of look like for the most part of how you're going out to bring people in? And then we'll talk about the auditions themselves.
Well, we wanted to do a lot of recruitment. We wanted to go to a lot of places because, again, we're not sure where the Oakland student will come from. We're not exactly, we're still experimenting and discovering all that great stuff. So we travel to a bunch of unified auditions. We start with Pittsburgh Unifieds this year. We'll probably do the same thing next year, and then maybe make some shifts and changes depending on once we sort of calibrate and from last year. But Pittsburgh Unifieds, the Moonifieds in Dallas, the Drunifieds in LA.
So many Unifieds.
All the 5.
And then the Unifieds in Chicago at Palmer
Unifieds in
House.
Chicago. And then we have on-campus auditions. We do 3 on-campus auditions. We also have you can just submit a video, and we can do video auditions for students who can't travel or have trouble, traveling. So that's been pretty great. So we actually found students through some of our video work that we do.
And do those then have a live interview component? Like, would you talk to them, or would it just be the video and then they're done?
Yeah, we tend to follow up with them and do a Zoom interview and talk to them or share with them whatever they want to know. Jacob and I are really open to answering questions. And so I think we probably met with, I mean, like 100 students over this past year, just meeting with them over Zoom, just to talk about stuff, talk to them about Oakland, because again, it is a newer program to them. I like to think it's, this hidden gem currently. So they want to know about it, and they want to know what campus life is like. They want to know we put them in touch with students, on Instagram and all that stuff, so they can really.
And we also want to know what they're like. That's the other thing. It's because it's a 4-year relationship. Yeah. So just because you can sing your face off and kick and act, you might not be the right energy for us, and we might not be the right energy for you. And so it is important to really take that into consideration as well when that person walks into a room. And now Danny and I, because we are new, and it was all, I mean, the amount of recruiting that we did is more than they usually have done in the past. Yep. So we weren't able to be there for the length of time we would like to be. And as Danny said, this is our great experiment this first year. Yep. So we're trying to figure out how it all lies. And I think we really quickly have figured it out, not figured out completely. No one ever has. So we are ready to hit the ground next year in understanding the admissions process and the students that we're looking for.
Always a really tenuous balance of like where your time and attention is with your current class, and then who you're looking at. That's a tricky thing to balance out, and it takes the mapping out of the year very particularly. This is happening.
Yeah, I will say this: students who come and audition for us always say they have a really fun time.
Yeah, I love it. Well, okay, so let's talk about the audition itself. And if you don't mind sharing us numbers, it's up to you, of course, but what does it look like in terms of how many human beings you're going to see? How many are then ultimately going to get an invite in terms of, from Oakland themselves or from you guys? So what does that look like in terms of what are we cutting down in that audition? And then I want to hear about the audition process itself.
Well, just to start, maybe I'll take the second part first, is Please. That their audition, currently we don't have a screening. We don't pre-screen.
A pre-screen, yeah. Mm-hmm.
So we see the students and make decisions fairly quickly. We have rolling admissions, so we might adjust that a little bit next year. But students receive letters, whether they're acceptance letters or waitlist letters, a week to 2 weeks after their auditions. Yep. So we try to be right on top of it. That can be good and bad, just depending on if someone auditions in the fall and then they're accepted. Yep. We still sometimes wait till May 1st to find out whether or not they're coming. Yep. So it's a long period of time. So we might adjust that a little bit, but we're going to play with that. Yeah.
Well, let's stick with that then. So, because I'm very interested in that, especially for some of the Pittsburgh Unified schools. It's just so early, of course, in the process. You're talking about, months before, what's that? More math, 7 months before they're ultimately going to be putting down a deposit, potentially. Of course, some people decide before May 1st, but
Oakland doesn't do a deposit.
Look at you, no fees whatsoever, but still a decision. Right. What does that look like in terms of like, again, I want to talk about what happens in the audition room in a second, but really like the recruitment / the relationship that you're talking about. Like, how do you like to maintain a relationship with a student? Let's say maybe in your case, you've given them a yes quickly out of Pittsburgh Unified, or you've given them a wait list, right? Mm-hmm. How does it then interact where are you seeing them again on the audition tour at some point in person? Are you reaching out via email? How do you like to be corresponded with, if you're sort of continuing that relationship with a student, assuming they're interested as well?
I think we like all the versions of contact. And it's funny you say that, because there was one person we saw at Pittsburgh who we really liked. And so then when we were at Chicago, he was there as well. And so we said, come back in and let's have more discussion. Yeah. So it's
all just have a chat. Come see us. Come visit.
Yeah.
It's not an audition at that point. You like them, but it's just continued with the relationship. It's another date or whatever. Yeah.
And like I have been calling nonstop. It's that thing where you want to make sure that they know you're interested. It's a delicate balance, because you don't want them to, you don't harass them.
Too eager. You don't want to be too eager. Too many texts. Wait 3 days.
Like an actor, right? Don't be too eager, but you still want the job. So it's that delicate balance, but at the same time, I will say this. I'm going to say this for your listeners out there.
Yeah.
We believe in you. We offer you a position. So don't ghost us. Mm-hmm. That's been a big issue with these students, is they just ghost. Send an email that says, thank you so much, I'm not interested, or thank you so much, you're at the top of my list.
Yeah.
But to just ghost us, I understand there's a lot of schools and probably a lot of interest with some of these students, but and it's not just with us. I've talked to other professors
For sure.
and across the board, big schools, little schools, everywhere, and ghosting is an issue.
Well, you talk about ghosting in, again, we always use the dating analogy that comes from the dating world. And I do think a lot of students just feel awkward saying
No.
no.
Yeah.
It's hard to say no to someone. It's
Yeah.
hard to reject someone, hard to break up with someone. People just disappear rather than breaking up with people.
Right.
It's hard to
I
do.
think we're pretty good at email communication.
Yeah.
So what we did this year is we checked in about 3 different times throughout the year with students. And so as
give me a sense
as
of
we
where you
build the rolling audition, rolling admission,
Yeah.
we would build the students into that list, and then we check in with all of them, and then we build that list, and then we check in with all of them again. Just making sure if they have any questions, offering Zoom appointments, if they want to just talk, if their parents want to talk to us, we're open to that.
Yep.
So we spend a lot of time focused on student communication when it comes to recruitment.
Well, and let's
and Charlie, I just want to say about Danny and I are in a great position because Oakland really trusts us, extremely trusts us. They're hands off with Danny and I, Danny and me.
There's math and grammar. My gosh,
math and grammar.
Such an academic podcast. Yeah.
So what happens is all the shots. We call all the shots. We call all the shots regarding recruiting and money.
Yeah.
So we get to distribute the scholarships how we would like. We recruit who we would like. It's not a take it before a bigger tribal council and decide. You know what I mean? So, and then we have an amazing
NBA, but we're doing Survivor references. Now we're in. I'm even more in with you now, Jacob. Now let's go. Screw the NBA.
Yeah.
Survivor.
And then we have a great recruitment. I forget what his official title is, but Alex Sellers, you can email him.
He's our recruitment and outreach manager.
Yes, and he's new as well, and so we're all in this together. I'm in his office every day, chatting. We're all in this together to help make this as smooth as possible. An issue we have run into, I just want to throw that out there with the new recruitment and us and our email system. Sometimes our emails go to spam to these students, and so I've had to reach out and say, no, check your spam folder, and then they're like, oh yeah, I did get accepted. So that has been an issue, especially when students start to make they have their high school email. Or students will start to make random email. They'll have 3 different emails, like Charlie Murphy Theater. At gmail.com.
Charlie Murphy College, probably realistically these days.
Charlie Murphy, yes, exactly.
I love that. I'm going to jump ahead and then I want to jump back to the audition room, which is just to say, so in having that much control, that means likely there's not a huge academic standard in terms of getting into the school. So what does that mean in terms of you're able to recruit and say yes to someone, and then they do have to somehow pass an academic bar? What does that look like in terms of the Office of Admissions actually saying yes to someone?
Well, they have to apply to the school. Again, it's like other programs, and then they apply to the program.
Both of which are free.
Right.
Both of which are free. There's no fees. But they really, the bar at Oakland is you have to have a 2.5 or above for acceptance. And for most students, that's not a problem at all. But there are some that struggle. And so that could be an issue. Again,
and if you see a student at a Pittsburgh Unified and you really love them, and let's say most do have above a 2.5, but let's say they don't, would you have any leeway to push for them above a 2.5? No, they really have to have a 2.5.
No, really. we had a student who we absolutely loved, and they were rejected from the school. Once they're rejected from the school, we can't do anything.
Yeah. Got it.
Yeah, totally. So they go through that process first, and then the program,
and then you see them. I mean, sometimes it means you'll literally see the person first, obviously, with some of these unified experiences. But
and sometimes, but the other thing that happens is that we love a person, we talk to them, we send them a letter, and they never apply.
Right.
Sometimes that has happened this past year. That was frustrating, but there's not a whole lot we can do with it. So eventually, after contacting them by email, if they don't contact us back, if they ghost us, then we sort of move forward without them in mind. But we do try to give as much opportunity as possible to students.
Totally makes sense. And do you interact at all with the academic application? Do you see their essays, or do you see test scores if they submit them? Do you see, you started to mention that, do you see their grade point average? Is that stuff that you look at or care about at all?
Yeah, we look at it not that we care about it. No, we care about it.
We care about
it. We care about it. But what I mean is, Alex has a spreadsheet that we're able to look at, and it has the grade point average, SAT, ACT scores. And it's great to look at that because I'm looking at that to go, ooh, they'll get academic money. We'll give this money. That's what I'm really looking at it for. is to see where they are grade point average wise, to see if there's a way to get them more money. That's always the goal. Danny and I have been through the business up, down, and sideways, and we are big both fans of get your degree for as little money as possible, because this is one of the most volatile businesses you're going into. Well, and you're getting a degree in auditioning, essentially.
Yeah. Can you talk me through a little bit? You don't have to give me all your magic sauce. I know it was year one, in terms of that kind of departmental control that you have over that money. It's something that I've said it's not unique, that certainly many programs don't have that, but some programs do. And parents are like, what? That can't be how it works. And like, it sometimes is that they really do have control, and they hold the purse strings. What is your objective as you do? Are you trying to just make sure you get people? So if someone else has more academic money, are they going to maybe get less talent money? Is it really based on objective talent? Like, what are you doing to sort of parse out the money that you've got? And then especially if you're giving money and then someone ends up not coming, how does that work in terms of how you redistribute? Just talk me through your financial end as much as you're willing to reveal.
Well, we allocate, and we get allocated a certain amount of money each year, and then we take that money and we essentially look at students. If they have great academic scholarships, they still could get a great talent scholarship as well. So we don't look at that and say, oh, let's get everybody even. Let's get everything.
Right. You're not trying to make it
students that we really want, that we're really interested in. We will give scholarship money too.
Yeah.
So we spent a lot of this past year giving. We increased the scholarship money for several students several times over the course of the year, because we were able to do that. So money comes back, we reallocate it very quickly.
I was going to say, some of that based on the interest that they're showing. So is it, hey, they go, I really think I would like to go here. The money is really attractive to me. As they're communicating that, is that making you go, well, now I think the student might actually be an Oakland student. And
we want to put the school in reach for somebody. So what can we do to put this program in reach for you? What would make this attractive to you? So that's something we consider. So a student who comes back and says, hey, I'm really interested, but I financially I'm struggling here, we can work with that. We don't have any issue working with that. So that's sort of how it goes. But staying in communication and for your listeners, being honest about where you are. A good program who cares about you is going to listen to that and hopefully be able to help. Some programs cannot as quickly as we do, maybe, but we can sort of throw in, whatever is needed to, again, put the school in reach.
And when Danny says that, I think this is important for your listeners to say too, because Danny and I have been using this lingo, and sometimes I'm like, I don't think you understand what we're saying. Your parents would if we were able to talk to them. But when Danny says something like, put it in reach, or when we say, what can we do to put this at the top of your list? Your listeners should know that the ball's in their court to say, I need more money.
Right.
Because sometimes they just go, I'll just let you know. They're not aware that the lingo we're using is basically saying, tell us what you want. It's like negotiating when you're an actor. Tell us what you want, and we'll see if we can make it happen. I was on the phone with a mother and her daughter, and I said, what can we do to put it in reach? And they were like, I don't know. I said, okay, I'm just going to cut it. Do you want money? What do you need? And they were like, oh, that would be great. And I was like, okay, that's what I'm saying. And then, we had this great relationship. But then also there are students who come to us and they say, I really want to come here. It's financially not doable for me at the moment. And we want them to know that that's not an end game. That's not an end. You know what I mean? That doesn't stop it right there. That's the beginning of the discussion.
I do think because some institutions are more formal in the way that they do it. And I just think because of the way people think about college, and maybe especially outside of the musical theater world, I do think people just don't, that's a hard lesson to break through. We've said that for so many years of like, what's the worst can happen? Try, if you negotiate on a car, you can negotiate on a college. People just feel like I shouldn't, it's rude, or like a lot of families don't like to do it.
Or they think they're not special enough to ask.
I guess you don't like me enough, or you would have given it to me.
And that's absolutely false, because we are looking at individuals for a program of maybe 12 to 16, as you said. So those 12, those 16 get a lot of attention. And as we figure out who those people are, we pour our energy into them. So they're individuals, and they should feel special and know that they are absolutely okay to discuss that kind of stuff with us.
Well, let's jump to the audition room itself. Well, I know that we're talking about different formats, whether it's at Unified, whether on campus, whether it's one of the the pre-unifieds of the Pittsburgh and the Moonifieds.
Mm.
When you're seeing students and you're making that decision of going, am I giving out one of my 12, 16 slots, whatever it is? What are you seeing artistically in terms of the work itself? And then if there's anything else in terms of stuff like interviews, when you have a chance to give them an interview, or adjustments or those kind of things, what is all going into that factor artistically in terms of what you're looking for to ultimately get to a yes?
That's a good question. When they enter the room, it's, you know this, Charlie. We all know this as we are actors.
It's all for our listeners, Jacob, of course.
I know, you know this. Charlie, you know this. Next question.
Next question. You know that answer. Ask a question you don't know.
But it's the minute, the second they step into the room, literally that's when the audition begins. And it's the energy. That's what I'm very sensitive to, is the energy they bring in the room. Because you have to understand, we are with each other for 4 years. Mm-hmm. And so the energy you bring in the room sets the whole tone. And then Danny and I are big sticklers for musicality and phrasing. And so that's one thing. And we will give adjustments in the room. Mm-hmm. It's so fun to hear them sing. And this whole there's been a nasty rumor about like legit is old school. No one wants to hear that. When a female comes in with a gorgeous legit and has a beautiful portamento, Danny and I are like, yes, beautiful. That's someone who understands musicality. Now, of course, we're also looking for the potential. We're not looking for a finished product, but we are looking for someone who is who's
teachable.
Yes, who has the foundation that we can confidently say, yes, we will take your money and give you a degree because we feel you can succeed in this business. Success is many different versions of success.
Yep.
And then what I love to do in the audition room is this is my thing. I will look at your special,
it is
and
a
I
thing.
do. It's a thing. I look at your special skills, and you better be ready. If you have a Liza Minnelli impersonation, I want to see it pull out. If you say I tumble, all right, can you safely do it? Change your shoes. I don't care. Let's see it. We've had a couple who have perfect pitch, and they have told us we're the only ones, and I hate saying this because I don't want your other colleges to catch on to this, but we're the only ones who will be like, prove it.
Give me an
and Danny will pull out his little app and we'll be like, A, go. And this one girl who just signed to come on, it was her perfect pitch was incredible. So, and what we're doing there is not just entertain us. That's where we actually get to see the real person.
Yep.
And so often I will also look at your credits and say, thanks, those were nice 2 songs you sang for us. I see that you played Amalia and She Loves Me. I want to hear Will He Like Me? And they'll be like, oh, and what you see in that moment is a real person who has not been trained in those 32 bar cuts. You see a real person.
Yep. I love that. And I think, we've talked a lot about those idea of adjustments, and I love that you guys are doing that for them in the room when you can. I wonder, how are you sensing in a Pittsburgh Unified's kind of audition where it's a more consortium style? How are you sensing some element of that when you don't have an opportunity to give them adjustment? Or maybe you're Chicago and you just don't have a lot of time and you aren't necessarily, spending those moments to go, let's take it again. Can I see that she loves me? What can a student do to walk in a room and give you that sense of who they are without necessarily getting the adjustment?
Well, one of the things we do for Pittsburgh, for example, I called back students and had conversations with them. We had little interview time. So that was a great way to get to know them after they auditioned.
After the audition,
But I don't know. I think it's through the material. I should know you better by the time your song's done.
Yep.
So make sure that the song has some kind of if you can, some sort of worldview to it that you also believe in. I think that's really hopeful and helpful to see and to hear. I don't know. It's really the students needn't be nervous. We all want to see you comfortable. I know it's hard not to be nervous in those situations, especially the consortium setups. But just trust in your material and trust in that there is an affable way to express yourself that shows off who you are, and pick material that also is special to you. You should love your material. If you're doing a song because your college coach said, this is amazing for you, just do it, you'll get into programs and you don't like it, do that song. There's just no point in not doing something that you absolutely love and connect to.
It's so well said. I think it's easier said than done to do that, but we all know it is possible to walk in a room with the confidence and with the ease that you don't necessarily need to give them a huge adjustment and go, I know that person. They showed themselves to me. Easier said than done to actually do it at 17 when, you know, it's
Sure,
earlier in your
sure.
process and things. But yeah, I love it. I'd love to hear about what else do you think about as you're filling out a class? So are you conscious of stuff like gender balance and height and size and, you know, geographic diversity? It sounds like you didn't even know your own geographic diversity, Jacob. But are you thinking about racial diversity? Or how are you thinking about, you know, of the 12 to 16, what they're going to look like as a class together? How do you factor that into admissions if you do?
I mean, I'll be honest. What I like to do is we have a big wall in my office with all the headshots, and it's fun to look at the diversity of it all. But the way, like this class that we've just recruited, it just magically has shaken down to people of all different shapes, size, colors, whatever, and that's been lovely. Of course, in musical theater, we could always use more good men, but but
we got 3 right here.
Yeah, right.
Come on.
Can I get a scholarship?
Yeah, exactly.
But it just, I don't know. I don't think Danny and I are so focused on making it, you know, it has to look a certain way. We want people who are excited to come here and who have great foundational talent and are eager to learn and interact well with us. And it just so happened that this very first class that we've recruited is a great mix and a great look, and I'm very excited for them.
I love it. I'd love to hear a little bit more. Just, you know, you've talked about some of the curricular changes, you know, and again, we talked at the beginning. This was my big question was like, man, how does it work with the shakeups of you moving, of schools moving, all these things, you know, knowing that you're going to be here, a guaranteed 10-year stint from Jacob and Danny. They could say it here on the pod. It's 2025. What does this program look like in 2035? What are some of the goals of going, hey, this is the ambitions to grow it, to solidify this, to, you know, you said we feel like still the hidden gem and we're still getting the word out there. What does look different 10 years from now in terms of your ideal world?
I think that it's again, that it becomes a known gem, that students come from all over the country. So we have a national presence, a little more fully national presence, and they're coming to school to do sort of intense work. What struck me from the showcase this year, for example, was that while the Oakland students didn't have some of the slickness of other schools, do you know what I mean? That sort of musical theater pizzazz. There was an edge to them that really, really helped the showcase be successful this year. And a lot of them got noticed and a couple of them are signed. And so it was a very successful showcase for us in its first year, again, with students that I just got to know this year. Yeah. But that's what struck me, is that I think we want students with polish, but we don't necessarily want them to lose their edge when it comes to who they are and what they want to do and how they present themselves.
Yep. I love it, Jacob. Anything you want to add in terms of the ambitions?
Oh, sure. I mean, I think we're started with once again, this class we recruited, I think we're started on a great trajectory. We are looking for individuals. Yeah. We're not looking for, you know, a giant class that all looks the same or anything like that.
Or I need 5 belters and 3 sopranos.
Yes.
We don't do that. Yeah.
We work with you and your talent. We know that you can succeed. Where that is, that's up to you what success looks like. And so I think going forward, I mean, it's going to be, we're a school that gives incredible training. Danny and I'm just going to toot our own horns. We are great instructors with toot beep beep, like with great pedigree. And so the goal is to recruit, to build, and to make this an affordable, really great training program where you don't lose your individuality. It is actually heightened. And you're ready to go out and be successful in whatever medium that is.
I love heightened individuality. It would be a great place to leave it, but I have to ask one more question, because you talked about some of the parent concerns, which is, you know, you talked about, are you leaving? Are you moving? That's something certainly people ask about a lot of schools. Another thing that has come up a lot in the post-UArts world is sort of, do you have a sense of the financial realities of Oakland? So it sounds like certainly affordable from the student end is fantastic. But do you have a sense, without knowing, you don't have to be a math major and know all the books, but do you have a sense of sort of Oakland's financial reality in terms of, are there any ways we can give assurances that the school will be financially stable moving forward?
I think it'll be financially stable moving forward. We have a great CFO. We've actually been able to meet him and talk with him a little bit about the program. He's incredibly supportive of the program. Uh, because we also, for example, we have an internship with Meadowbrook Theater, which is the Lort Theater here in Michigan, and they're
Hmm.
right on campus. So we have a student co-pro that we do with them every year, and they're really pouring money into that co-production to make sure that it's a success for our students and a successful
Hmm.
experience for everyone at Meadowbrook and all the professionals that come in from New York and Chicago and LA that work there. So I think we've got a lot of support. I mean, I don't
I
really.
think, yeah, we have our biggest support, and this is important for your listeners and
Oh
viewers
yeah.
to hear and watch, is the president of the school, Aura.
Hmm.
She comes to everything.
Hmm.
She has come to a reading I directed. She'll come to the opera. She'll come to the musical. She is a huge fan of the arts.
She
Hmm.
When
flew
the
into New York
Yes,
with some donors just to see the showcase.
That's awesome.
And
Yeah.
I
and
mean, just to
she
be there, be a part of
yeah,
it.
Hmm.
and she told Danny and I, and she told Danny and me, grammar, that we next year we're going to do a whole experience with donors where we
Hmm.
take them to shows and they come to the showcase. You know what I mean?
Yep.
I don't think your listeners and viewers will understand how some presidents never step foot
Oh, for sure.
into the theater.
Yep.
Our president is there to a point where I'm like, oh my gosh, you surely have better things to do than watch this small little showcase we're doing.
Yep.
But no, she is incredibly supportive, and I think
Yeah.
that just goes to show you, if anything were to be cut funding wise, it would not be the arts.
I love it. All right. I know we got to let Danny go. He's got to go into a meeting. Let me just, my very last question to you is just advice for parents. You mentioned that you have sometimes given the parental advice of asking for more money. Is there anything else, just as you think about your interactions with parents in this process, in terms of especially how they can help guide their child through this harrowing process that it is? Anything you would say to those parents out there?
That we care and that we will take care of your child
Hmm.
as much as we can. Do you know what I mean? We will help them to grow. We will help to lead them to their new experiences and help them blossom and bloom. I mean, that's something that we're dedicated to doing. So I wouldn't worry. I wouldn't worry about them. Oh, I think some good advice would be to let the student advocate for themselves for the
Hmm.
most part. That's the advice I would give because a lot of
Hmm.
FERPA rights and all that stuff, we can't actually talk to parents necessarily about students' financial standing. You know
Hmm.
what I mean? So if a student wants to advocate for something, they should send the email. They should learn to write and to talk and to express themselves clearly. And that's the relationship, the primary relationship that we're going to have with them and the family. Parents are welcome to ask questions and all that, but let your child advocate for themselves as much as
Yep.
you can throughout the process.
I love
And I
it.
think on the flip side of that is also, don't be afraid to get on the phone with your child and talk to us,
Yeah,
because sometimes students don't understand the money side at all.
Hmm.
You know what I mean? So get on the phone with your child and talk to us. And I love talking to parents. And when the parents come to Unifieds or any of those, I'll
Yeah.
often ask, is your parent or whoever you're with outside? And they'll
Uh-huh.
be like, yeah, I'll say, bring him in, bring him in.
And
And
do you
then
make
we'll
them
have
do
a
special
discussion.
skills? Do they have to do Liza Minnelli impressions? Because
if we
that
could,
sounds
we probably would.
harrowing.
We
Yeah.
could, we
I
probably would.
think
You
I
tumble?
think that's absolutely what we're going to do from now on. I'll
Hey,
be like,
free
you
ideas. Yeah.
yes, there we go. But no,
Where
we're
did she
very
get this from?
it's very important to us to get to know the parents as well,
Yeah.
though. And so the parents, we love a supportive parent, but like Danny said, know that we care. And that's actually been a question or something that has been said to us also is, will you take care of
Hmm.
my child?
Yeah.
And I think, yes, we've asked you to come here. The next 4 years are going to be very important. We have no choice but to make sure that they are taken care of as much as possible.
I love it. Okay, we're gonna wrap there. If people want more information, where is the best place? Do you like websites, social media? Where's the best place to direct them to?
I'll say,
First, yeah, go ahead.
I was going to say website, but it's not very clear on the website yet. We're
Yeah.
still overhauling, looking at website stuff. But you can always email us. In
Yeah.
fact, we love an email, jwidmar@oakland.edu.
Or D. Gurwin at oakland.edu, Gurwin with a U.
Great.
And it's both on the websites. You can also email Alex Sellers. I don't know his email off the top of my head, but he's on the website. And he
F.A.
will...
Sellers.
F.A. Sellers?
F.A. Sellers at Oakland.
Didn't see that.
Yeah.
Didn't see that coming.
Fancy like that.
But we love communicating, so please reach out an email and ask any questions.
We've gotten to the point of the podcast where we're reading emails out loud, so we're going to wrap it there. It was so cool to get to chat with you, Jacob. So great to see you again, Danny.
Yes.
And I really appreciate your time, both of you.
Thanks, Charlie.
Thank you so much.
Yes. So fun to get to talk with Danny and Jacob. You know, you could definitely feel a good energy of what they're trying to build over there. I was going to do a long faculty takeaway or a long takeaway on faculty movement, really, in general. But I think I ended up hitting most of it in each direction. So I'm going to do a shorter one. But basically, just to kind of add on, I do really hope for Oakland's sake that Jacob and Danny do stay put for a decade or whatever it is, right? In general, I'm a fan of getting in new and fresh perspectives into school. I think it's really helpful. But I also do think too many switches within too short a period of time, really for any school, can be tough on students, right? Sometimes when you're brought in by one person and then they leave, it can feel like, you know, like what I said in the episode, right? Am I a Steph Curry fan or am I a Golden State Warriors fan, right? You know, am I a Jacob and a Danny person or am I an Oakland person, right? It's always like a little bit of a mix of both in every case, but it's easier when you have that continuity for a period of time, even when people do leave, right? Especially if you can get a smooth transition and a clear communication on the way in and out when people do leave, right? That's ideal, but it's just not always realistic. It's just not always possible. You know, when you have that situation where a legendary faculty member retires from a place, sometimes you have literally a multi-year runway, sometimes like a 4 or 5 year runway, so that an admitted class might know that they're coming in and they're going to be that person's last class that they take them all the way through, right? That's awesome when it happens. So you're clear on what's happening as a student and you feel really taken care of. But that is much easier with something like retirement than it is with a faculty member who might be changing schools. And honestly, that level of information, that isn't always available with retirement either. Sometimes you know a year in advance or not even necessarily that, right? It just depends on the faculty member. And especially when someone changes schools, you're not going to have anywhere near that kind of notice, right? It can be a bit trickier, right? We'll talk about that more in some upcoming specific episodes, but I really think that is relevant right now at so many schools. You know, whether you're talking about the transition at a place like Texas State or, you know, what's currently happening at Oberlin and Baldwin Wallace, which both Vicky and Baldwin Wallace will be coming on the pod in coming months. Fear not, they are booked and planned. Or what you just saw with this very podcast, when we talk about Oakland University, right? We had Robert Westenberg from Missouri State on the pod retiring, then Josh Young, who left Oakland to take over from him, and then Danny leaving Arizona to take over from at Oakland, right? That's not even a particularly strange situation, right? It's just a ripple that leaves a lot of schools and a lot of students' lives changed. And so an effect that we all are noticing as it happens. Okay, and let's do one more takeaway so that I have a prayer of picking up my daughter on time today. She believes in me. She wants me to pick her up on time today, and I believe I can do it. Which is just talk a little bit about time versus credits when you talk about schools. Really, this is one where I almost want to throw it out to all of you listeners. Just, is there a way that you prefer to hear these broken down for you? Or is what I'm doing helping you in the way that I'm trying to break down time and energy versus credits? You know, I'll say personally, when I see something written in credit hours, it's not always the most helpful for me. You know, I said it on the episode and I say it a bit more on some future episodes. I think sometimes families can be deceived if they see those credit hour numbers and don't understand what that actually breaks down into their schedule, right? To me, it's sort of like weighting with GPAs. When you talk about a 4.0 at one school might mean like you're literally one of the very best students in the school, and another school you're like average or below average because of the scale you're working on. People have 5.0s, or now these days sometimes people have 6.0s. I don't know how you get a 6.0, but there you go. They have different scales and different, you know, numbering than we used back in my day, right? I feel this way with credit hours sometimes, that it can be a bit confusing in how classes are labeled, especially since there's so many in-person hours expected at a lot of these BFA classes, and they will weight them differently. You'll hear about some schools will change the way that they choose to weight BFA hours to try to make them more clear or to try to sneak in extra classes depending on the school. So for me, it's always most helpful to see some version of a sample schedule as best as you can see a sample freshman schedule, a sample sophomore year schedule, et cetera. Though, of course, when you're talking about the more academic classes, there may be more time out of class needed than with artistic classes. But knowing all of your artistic classes do have some requirements outside of class as well, right? You might not have a lot of homework for a dance class, though again, you could have some, but you're going to have significant investment of time outside of class hours generally when you talk about acting classes, voice and speech classes, theater history classes, whatever it is, right? Of course, I think the most helpful thing, if you're trying to get a sense of what is the schedule really like, is those school visits and shadowing a student on what one of their actual days is like. Ideally, we've talked about with those visits, when they're actually an admitted student is the best time. But obviously, that is not going to be possible for your whole school list that you're going to visit 25 schools. If you're looking at 25 schools at this point, this is not realistic that you're going to sit in them. So we're trying to give you a bit of a sense of what a lot of these BFAs can look like in general, and then trying to help you distinguish a little bit between those schools, right? Whether it's a school where it's a little bit more like a 70-30 split or an 80-20 split or a 60-40, whatever it is, whether even in that split, we're often talking about, the artistic versus academic in all of the ways that split might actually mean, right? Whether you're talking about the split in hours, the split in intensity, the split in expectations, some of it's a little bit ineffable, right? Some of it's hard to convey on a podcast, but in general, I do think it is one of those biggest distinguishers between some of these different BFA programs. Are all of their students like eating and sleeping at the Purnell Center, which was the case for me at Carnegie Mellon? The answer was yes. We did eat, sleep. Most of our time was at the Purnell Center. That was closer to me, felt like a 90-10 split in terms of how I was spending my time. It was either there or the basketball, playing intramural basketball. But most of my time academically was spent within Carnegie Mellon. Or at some schools, it's just the biggest building amongst many that you're going to spend a large chunk of time in. And some of that, again, goes to some schools have even their MT programs split across different buildings. So not so much about the building, but it could be the conglomeration of buildings that is the musical theater buildings that you use, right? If it's a BFA, it's not going to just be like one of many. It's going to be more than it'll be at an English major, right? It will be a big part of your life at any BFA, but it really can vary from school to school in terms of how much a part of your life it is, right? Whether it's that 90-10 split or a 60-40 split, it's a big difference between those two things, right? And of course, as you heard in the episode, it also can vary student by student based on what they choose to do in terms of academics and activities. If you're, testing out of classes, you might have even fewer academics. If you're trying to add academics to get a minor or double major at different schools, it can really change it. So all of this is like scatter plots within scatter plots, but hopefully you can get from that some bit of tangible information, really. And the question is like, let us know what you think. Is there a way that's most helpful to your brains and understanding the differences between those 60-40, 70-30, 90-10 splits, or, how I use it with numbers, or if there's a different way that would be helpful for you to kind of try to understand how these programs can differ from themselves. I'm really trying to translate what to me is like a visual schedule into something that hopefully you can understand as a listener. And I'm really happy to hear feedback in terms of what would work well for you. And if you all are familiar with giving us feedback, you can do that by leaving us a rating and review wherever you listen or watch podcasts, or by commenting on any social media post, which would be done by Jordan Rice at Mapping the College Audition. When you're giving us those 5 stars, you're appreciating the producing work of Kelly Prendergast and Meghan Cordier. And if you leave us a review, I might just take the time to read it on the show. I haven't done that in a while, but maybe next week I'll read some reviews on the show. And in the meantime, you can check us out at mtca.com for help with all of your individual coaching needs. To my young artists out there mapping their journeys, please trust that you are enough for the right school, exactly as you are right now, and keep striving. We'll catch you next week.